Welcome to a special TwinSpires one-on-one segment. Nick Tammaro here, hosting our European racing expert, Maddy Playle. We're going to go over some of the international runners in detail. Maybe not quite all of them. We're going to definitely focus our attention on the UK and European-based runners that are going to be in this weekend's Breeders' Cup. Maddy, so glad to have you join me. Welcome to the TwinSpires family. And how excited are you about this upcoming Breeders' Cup meet?
Thanks so much, Nick. Yeah, I'm absolutely delighted. It's a meeting I stay up late and always watch, and it's just super enjoyable. The coverage, everything you guys do over there is quite different for us to over in Europe, and love to see it because our horses often come to the fore, so that's no bad thing either.
Yeah. We don't have to talk about the Ryder Cup or anything like that, but I think the European contingent is going to do well on American soil again, as is often the case, specifically over some of the fast ground at Del Mar. So that'll be one of the themes that we talk a little bit about, I think, as we go through these fields. But let's get right to it. The first race we'll talk about is the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Turf Sprint, which is race 6 on Friday afternoon, and we're going to have probably two runners in here that lead the market that are coming from international races. Obviously, the chief among them is True Love. True Love has been installed as a pretty heavy morning line favorite. She's actually only 7-2 on the morning line. I think she's going to go down off quite a bit lower than that. Drew Post 9, Group 1 winner of the Cheveley Park. How good is True Love, Maddy?
I think she's really, really good. She's incredibly talented. We saw that very, very early on with her form. She finished behind the Stad in her maiden, more of him a little bit later on, then went on to win the Queen Mary at Royal Ascot, of course, went to the Curragh and really showed her quality in the Group 2 Railway Stakes. She was disappointing there back at the same track over the course and distance in the Phoenix Stakes next time when only second to Power Blue. But I think something was clearly wrong there. She seemed back to her best at Newmarket last time in the Cheveley Park Stakes. She's very fast. For a 2-year-old filly, she's incredibly well built. She's very strong. And I think the conditions are really going to suit her. The draw will be interesting in terms of how that plays out with this race. But I think in terms of ability, she's exceptional as a 2-year-old filly goes.
So one of the fillies that she vanquished last time out was Havana Anna, who comes into this race as, I guess you could say, a bit of an outsider, just now having to find a way to beat True Love. Havana Anna does feel like she might have maybe a little bit of an edge at 5 furlongs versus the 6 that they went last out.
Yeah, I think that could be true. Havana Anna, she's got a really nice profile. She's never been out of the 3 in all of her 6 starts. But I just think in terms of pure quality, she's going to have to find it again with True Love. But if True Love gets a bad draw, Havana Anna gets a good one, it could bring them closer together. I think True Love, I don't think 5 furlongs is probably her optimum trip. So that could be one thing to just keep an eye on. But I think in terms of her ability, she is well clear.
One horse from the Aidan O'Brien, or the Ballydoyle yard, I should say, that narrowly missed last out in the Cornwallis was the one Brussels, who's 8-1 on the morning line. Christophe Soumillon, who obviously is the chief rider at the moment with Ryan Moore convalescing. He's aboard. This horse is just 1 for 6, but has obviously run very well multiple times, including a good second in the Group 1 Middle Park back in September.
Yeah, you're doing my job for me. That's the key piece of form with Brussels is that Middle Park second. That was a slightly muddling race. I don't think it was necessarily the strongest Middle Park that's ever been run. This horse is admirable. He's always been towards the top of the Ballydoyle pecking list from an early stage, but he's not an absolute standout. And I think one of the angles to mention here is, and you touched upon it, Christophe Soumillon's riding Brussels. I presume that's because he can't do the weight of True Love, who's of course going to be carrying 8 stone 7 in our metrics. That would be the reasoning, I think, why he wouldn't be on the first string, if you like.
That's actually a good point. I didn't think I noticed that Wayne Lorden was on True Love. Noticed that he was on her last time out as well. But yeah, Christoph's a bit bigger guy for a jockey. So the 119 that True Love gets in as a filly is what she will tack on the outside. Well, that's a good look at the Juvenile Turf Sprint, where I'm guessing your pick would be True Love.
I think she's going to have to be purely because of her raw ability. I think she's the best horse in this field. I do think that I'm glad she's drawn out in the 9 because I think there's pace there and that will give Wayne Lorden room to operate. But I do think she's going to really need to be on her A game to be fast out over this 5 because I do think she's probably a slightly better filly over an extra furlong. But I think her class will see her through.
It'll be a fun way to kick off Breeders' Cup proceedings with that juvenile turf sprint. Let's shift our focus to race number 8 on Friday's card. That is the juvenile fillies turf, where Aidan O'Brien is well represented once again, 6-5 on the morning line, number 13, Precise, a dual Group 1 winner, coming in, Maddy, with about as good a set of credentials as we've seen from a Ballydoyle runner over the years. Just how good is Precise?
Yeah, well, obviously, Lake Victoria blew her rivals away in this race last year, and Precise is coming there with a very similar profile. I was Lake Victoria's biggest fan, and I'm reluctant to say Precise is quite as good just yet, given we've seen what Lake Victoria did since. But she's just super admirable. She won her first Group 3 at Goodwood in August over the 7 furlongs, then went to the Curragh, where she wasn't the top dog of the Aidan O'Brien fillies in the Moygla Stud Stakes, still managed to win. And then last time at Newmarket, up to a mile for the first time, we really got to see what she was capable of in the fillies mile, and she just proved herself head and shoulders above the rest of the fillies around. Probably wasn't the deepest fillies mile we've ever seen, but she's just exceptional, and I think this should be an easy win for her. She's got the 13 gate, but I'm not overly concerned by that. We've seen horses win this race from out wider before, the likes of Sharing, Rushing Fall, etc. And I think that's going to give Christoph plenty of room. He's not going to get trapped on the inside at any stage, and that's going to give him options. She's by Star Spangled Banner. His progeny tend to love quick ground. He was a top sprinter out of a Galileo at Mare. I think she's exceptional.
Yeah, she looks awfully tough to beat on paper, deserving of that heavy favoritism. And it's really just been Lake Victoria and Precise that we've seen come over with these kind of credentials. Group 1, multiple Group 1 winners, each of them, and Precise having done it now at a mile as well. Additionally, worth noting, Andrew Balding has had some success in North America. He's sending over Pacific Mission. This is a horse I had a little affinity for watching back that Mayhill. I understand class-wise, she's definitely lesser than a filly like Precise. That goes without saying. But I thought that she was that progressive type that we've seen run well over here in the past, the kind that might just be a little lesser, but are getting better and could have targeted this race. 15-1, you give any chance to Pacific Mission?
She's a much bigger price with the bookies over here. You can see 25-1. Yeah, I see the angle for sure. On that Mayhill run, I think she's just learning all the time. She's a lot more unexposed than the favourite, and she'd only won a Kempton novice prior to running at Doncaster, so that was a big step up. Again, I think these mile fillies at this stage in the season, the ones that race strongly in Britain and Ireland and indeed Europe, have a real good chance in these sort of conditions. I think the longer distance race, it just plays to their strength. So I could certainly see her running an improved race as well. Another horse we should mention who's in there is Queen of Hawaii for Joseph O'Brien, had his success as a rider at this track, remember, aboard St Nicholas Abbey. This is a really nice filly as well, and I can imagine she'd be targeted at this race from a long way out, given that she's in his stable, and she's got a really nice profile too, having won 2 of her 3 starts.
Entered and scratched in the Fillies Mile, if I remember correctly, right? Because I saw somewhere that she was in there but did not participate, and I don't think that's a bad thing by any means. I like the freshness coming in, so the fact that she's been off for a couple of months gives me no concern. Any worry for you?
No, that wouldn't give me any concern. It was a vet certificate that day, so don't know exactly what went on, but I can presume that it wasn't a big problem given that she's shipped out to Del Mar. Yeah, I would probably put her on a par with Pacific Mission. I think they both have strong chances. And then speaking of the O'Brien team, well, other brother Donica's got a hand in there too with Valentina, who runs in the colours of Porta Fortuna, of course, who you'll know very well. She's a bit more exposed and was well beaten last time, but if she could return to her A game, she could be in the mix as well. But there's some really, really quality fillies in this race.
Strong representation, no doubt about it, in the juvenile fillies turf, where we will likely see one of the shorter priced favorites of the day. Shortest price on turf would be my guess is Ted Noffey will likely be a little bit shorter than 6-5 in the juvenile, which will go as race number 9. Let's turn to the nightcap on Friday. Race number 10 is the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Turf, a race that Aidan O'Brien, for the most part, Maddy, has completely dominated over the years, and it's just that his horses are so much more advanced by this stage. And you take a horse like Gstaad, who comes in with 3 Group 1 placings. Ironically, he was favored in all of those and found a way to lose each time. I think that
Mm.
probably says a lot more about who he was running against, especially when you juxtapose them against what he's running against here. This felt to me like a horse that was a pretty likely winner, even with this difficult outside draw.
Yeah, I agree with that. Talking about the outside draw, that's the main talking point, isn't it? But remember back in 2015, Hit It a Barn won from the 14 gate, and last year Henry Matisse won from 12. Start, he's got a really interesting profile. Again, another one by Star Spangled Banner, so he will love the quick ground. Went to Royal Ascot for the Coventry Stakes and blew his rivals out of the water. That's a big, important stallion making race. Since then, he's been slightly disappointing just because of the regard that he's held in. And as you say, finished runner-up 3 times in those Group 1 events, but they were all pretty strong affairs. I think this is going to be easier than anything he's faced. He is up to a mile for the first time. I don't think he's probably an out-and-out miler in Europe, but of course, the mile at Del Mar is a totally different kettle of fish. I think that will play to his strengths fine. Outfielder is also in there for the Ama Racing Wesley Ward combination. We saw him, of course, finish behind Stad in the Prix Morny back in August. Uh, to me, he just looked like a horse who needed more time and probably more distance than that 6 furlongs.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see distance wise where outfielder really ends up being best. His dam actually was a grip stakes winner around 2 turns over here and was graded stake caliber. Never quite got a placing in any of them, but it's Wesley. You know, Wesley's a funny guy in terms of the way he campaigns these horses. He debuted this horse on turf, sent him over there, brought him back, ran him on dirt, had him entered in a stake race last week at Keeneland on dirt, entered him in the juvenile turf sprint and the juvenile turf, opted to go the longer route, which he's going to make his presence known at the very least because he'll be the speed. And drawn in the 3, I think the key with David Egan aboard is going to be for them to go and try and establish the running. I think that'll actually work out well because it feels to
Mm.
me like Istad wants to be somewhat forward. I don't really think he wants to be way out the back, a la a horse like Henri Matisse. Is that fair to say?
I think he's pretty flexible, but yeah, I'd be more inclined to see him. He's a very fast horse, naturally, as we saw in the Coventry. So I think he'll be there or thereabouts. I think you're totally right about outfielder. That's the way that I would try and ride the race if I was David Egan. I think we just saw in the pre-morning how he got lost as they quickened in that middle part of the race. So this mile is definitely going to help him, I think, in these conditions.
Yeah, tough way to go 8 furlongs for the first time, which is what outfielder will do. But as far as other European participation in here, I don't know if we had planned on bringing anybody up. Quite honestly, they all look like long shots. But Ardizia comes out of a second place finish on British Champions Day, stepping up in trip for the first time to a mile for Hugo Palmer. This feels like a pretty big ask, right?
Yeah, I think this would be a really big ask. This is an admirable gelding. He's done a lot of running, had the 11 runs as a 2-year-old, been gelded in between. That was a great run behind Mission Central, who's a horse we might talk about some other stage last time at Ascot. But I think he's pretty exposed, and I wouldn't be expecting him to win anyway. Maybe he can trouble the judge for a minor position.
Ardizia has run more as a 2-year-old than some of our horses in the Breeders' Cup Classic on Saturday. We will get to Saturday action now as we pivot and take a look at the Breeders' Cup Turf Sprint, which goes as race number 5 on Saturday afternoon. This is a race that was won by European invader Starlust a year ago under what I've already determined is one of the greatest rides in Breeders' Cup history aboard Starlust that day, coming up the inside to get up just in time, angled out. The horse I guess that we'll focus on as far as this race goes is Arizona Blaze, who was a pretty unlucky second in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Turf Sprint last year. I love the way this horse is coming in. I thought his flying 5 was very good. 5-1 that day. He's 5-1 this time around. I'm on board. Am I off my rocker?
No, absolutely not at all. I think he's got a great draw as well in the 3. He's super strong. What he's done this season's been fantastic. He particularly caught my eye at Royal Ascot when arguably he was unlucky not to win the Commonwealth Cup over the 6 furlongs. He's got a lot of raw pace and quality, this horse, and physically he's got an awful lot of power as well. I think he's just improved with that extra year under his back. As you say, went so close last year. Maybe he can get redemption this time around. I certainly would have him preferred ahead of the other Ammo Racing runner, Bucanero Fuerte, who's a year older. He's also a talented horse by Wootton Bassett, but I think Arizona Blaze has got a really great post. And I think he's probably peaking right now compared to some of these who are probably going to need more to drop in their favour.
The main speed in this race is likely one door to the inside of Bucanero Fuerte. It felt to me in watching some of the replays back like Bucanero Fuerte's job in here might be to make sure the early running is as strong as possible. I'm not saying he can keep up with the likes of She's So Spicy, who is pretty quick, but is that safe to assume that he's going to be forward enough to hopefully force this thing along?
I think he could be, yeah, but it might be underplaying to say that that's his sole role. You know, this is a Group 1 winner in his own right, Phoenix Stakes winner as a juvenile, and he's not had the smoothest passage since then, had a couple of breaks, had a couple of issues, but we know that he's a really talented horse on his day. But I see the logic that you take with him based on that Flying 5 performance last time out. That could probably help Arizona Blaze, if we're being honest.
Yeah, it feels like it wouldn't be a bad thing at all. This is a fun edition of the Breeders' Cup Turf Sprint, a race again won last year by Starlust in the last second. Motorius was a narrow loser in there, and he is back for more, as is AG Bullet, both of whom have had limited campaigns this year, but have run well in their opportunities. Motorius 4 for 5 lifetime at Del Mar, so going to be excited to see him run back and give it a try. Well, the biggest purse on the day comes in the Breeders' Cup Turf, Maddy, which goes as race number 8. Rebels Romance is a horse that I didn't really plan on bringing up with you because we kind of know him well enough over here. The horse that I wanted to use your expertise on is Mini Hawk, who looks to be one of the more significant, I should say, entrants in this race that we've seen in some time. A really decorated filly, a 3-year-old filly taking on males at the 1.5-mile trip. She looks awfully good and looks like she'll make her impression known here.
Yeah, she's one of the best horses in the world at the minute. I think that's fair to say, to be honest. She's certainly getting into that category anyway. And we've just seen her improve so much as a 3-year-old filly. Started out at Chester in May and won a trial for the Oaks. Beat her stablemate Whirl, who was a multiple Group 1 winner in the Oaks itself at Epsom. Then went to the Curragh. Didn't look overly impressive there, but got the job done. Went to York. Just did what she needed to do to get ahead there of some decent fillies, a Strange in second. And then last time at Longchamp, I wasn't sure whether the very soft ground would suit her, given her pedigree. But she seemed to absolutely go through it no problem and was arguably a little unfortunate not to win the Prix de l'Arc de Triomphe. And we know 3-year-old fillies have a good record in the race. Exceptional ones have won it, and she very nearly added her name to that roll of honour. I think it's very significant that even after a tough race there and a campaign that's not been overly hard, but it has been long, Aidan O'Brien said, nope, she's going to go to the Breeders' Cup Turf. For me, that's a huge vote of confidence that they think she's one of their best horses. And the scary thing for her rivals is she could still be improving. I think she has an amazing physicality about her. Some of the footage I've seen of her, it's really blown me away. I think she's going to improve and improve again. I hope we get to see her in training as a 4-year-old because I think we could see even better then. But yeah, she's going to represent a really, really tough opponent for Rebels Romance, who of course is going for an incredible 3rd win in the race. He's a superstar. We know all about him, but he's going to get a different sort of challenge on his plate in this Breeders' Cup Turf, I think. And then there are so many other really interesting European contenders to talk about. Goliath, the former King George winner, they sent him globe-trotting quite a couple of times. Of course, he went to Tokyo for the Japan Cup. He went to Hong Kong earlier this year. He won a German Group 1 when he was last seen. That was back to form in the Grosser Preis von Baden, so it'd be interesting to see how he matches up. And then we've got a whole host of 3-year-olds in Amelot, Wimbledon, Hawkeye. Ethical Diamond's another one in there for Willie Mullins. You have another good orphan runner in El Cordobés. So I could keep going. Rashabar, Salawi, etc. We really seem to have this race dominated. And it's going to be fascinating to see who will come out best in these conditions because they're very different to what they've faced recently at home.
Yeah, exactly. And the fast ground obviously will certainly help some. It feels to me as if there's a pretty decent chance that Mini Hawk will take well to it. She obviously ran well on fast ground. I think the biggest thing you could probably provide us some assistance with is where should people, I should say, that back Mini Hawk expect to see her early? She's got enough tactical speed to stay close, but it does seem like the early gallop in here will be, I would say, pretty strong.
Yeah, and that would really suit her. In fact, I'd say she needs that to be seen at her best, definitely. We saw at the Curragh how she took quite a bit of stoking to get into position. She's not always got the most electric turn of foot. Earlier in the season, we thought she she sort of was just dossing a bit and not giving her absolute optimum. So I think the faster the pace, the better, and the closer to the pace that she is that's probably better as well. So I personally, I would want to see her ridden prominently, just because I think that gives the jockey the best chance of her producing her best. I think asking her to produce a big effort from further back could be more problematic.
Years ago, when we had horses have success coming out of it, the likes of Red Rocks and Conduit, I told myself always take St. Ledger horses seriously. Amelot does look like he's facing about as tough a Breeders' Cup turf field in terms of depth that we've had in a while. But is he a 10-1 shot with at least a puncher's chance coming out of that now, second off the layoff after winning that King Edward back at Royal Ascot in June?
He's a really interesting horse, and he was unbeaten until his last start as well. So I can see why people would get drawn into him. I spoke to the Connections, the racing manager for the owners, the Ackroyds, recently, and they say all has gone really well with him. And I think he's got a really nice profile for a race like this in usual circumstances. But as you say, it's incredibly strong. This is going to be a big ask for him. The one concern I have with him is after his King Edward the Seventh win in the summer, Rafe Beckett sort of said, I think he was feeling that good firm ground in the closing stages. Well, he was quite keen not to run him on it again directly, and he took some time off. There was a suggestion he might go to the King George after that. He didn't. He wanted a bit more of a break. So I wonder whether Connections seem to think they're happy to give firm ground another go, but I thought that his immediate reaction after the race was quite telling there, Rafe Beckett. So I'd be interested to see just how effective he is on this surface, because they clearly held doubts before.
You've alluded to it, and I don't really want to make you repeat yourself over and over, but as far as Rebels Romance goes, I want people to understand that the difference between Mini Hawk and what he's beaten in his prior two Breeders' Cup turf wins is pretty significant, right? I mean, the favorite in 2022 was Nation's Pride, who was a stablemate of Rebels Romance. You had Mishriff in there, who was kind of over the top at that point. You had Broom in there, who really was never of Group 1 international caliber. Last year, Luxembourg was the Ballydoyle entrant. Mini Hawk is on a different planet than those horses, right?
Yeah, I think she is. And I think the thing about Rebels Romance is we get drawn into thinking that in some ways he's fortunate, but that's because he does everything right. He's just a jockey's dream to position. And you kind of think, oh, well, if this horse had been raced differently against him, maybe he'd have got closer. And you find excuses to take on Rebels Romance. And you are right, the quality is of a different caliber. But at the same time, this is a horse who wins. And ultimately, that's what they're all trying to do. I would say the prices at the minute, it's incredible, isn't it? You can have a dual Breeders' Cup turf winner at like 3-1, Mini Hawk more closer to 11-10. And he's been there and done it twice, but that's the power of potential versus proven ability.
No, you're right, and what you say is completely accurate. And additionally, I would say that in his Breeders' Cup Turf win in 2022, it was kind of a moderately paced race. He came from deep in the pack. In 2024, it was a fast-paced race. He was close. And last time out in the Joe Hurst Turf Classic at Aqueduct, he made a huge decisive move around the first turn to reach the lead and then just blew their doors off. And granted, I mean, redistricting and El Cordobas are horses that he's supposed to be handling very easily, and he did that. So there's something to be said for how admirable this horse is, that he fires just about every time. And I barely remember back to when he was a 3-year-old on the UAE Derby Trail and a race that he ended up winning, and they opted to not come over here and run in the Kentucky Derby. And here he is, 4 years later, still running at a high level. It's nice to see. And I think if I can't win a bet, I'd hope that Rebels Romance would win the race. But I'd rather win a bet at the end of the day. So
wouldn't we all? But we've all lost a lot of money taking him on in recent years. But it's worth saying that, yeah, Joe Turf Classic was actually not that far off his best on our Racing Post ratings. It's just a pound off his absolute optimum. So he might be 7 years old, but he's certainly not slowing down. And he's just a really remarkable, extraordinary horse. And he's got that feel-good factor about him. Like you say, we had that at Royal Ascot in the summer when he won the Hardwick Stakes. He also went up in Trip to Ireland 6 furlongs this season in the Yorkshire Cup, won that race. William Buick said, we won't be doing that again. He's not a stayer, but he just won it purely on ability. He's just a real exceptional animal, Rebels Romance, and a friend to us all. Maybe not so much if he beats us.
Exactly right. That is the truth. Let's go to race 10, which is the Breeders' Cup Mile on Saturday afternoon. Couple of horses for us to talk about, in part because notable speech. The 5-2 morning line favorite is a horse that we've actually seen in North America a couple of times, including last time out in the Woodbine Mile. I'm sure we'll touch on him at some point. I have to say, Maddie, I thought 6-1 was awfully juicy on the three Salon, a horse that is now a winner of two straight, including the Group 1 Prix du Milan de Longchamp, a race that over throughout history of the Breeders' Cup Mile, horses that ran well in there have fared well in the Breeders' Cup Mile. I know the horse was 14-1 in the Prix du Milan de Longchamp. He's got to be pretty interesting at 6-1 in here.
Nick, you've read my mind. My hands are rubbing together. When I've been going through these races for the last couple of days, and Salan is the horse that I've really wanted to keep on side, if I'm honest. Like I say, they were very brave in, I think they supplemented him for that Prix de Moulin. And I think on the race day, there was a lot of attention directed towards Rosalian, who was unlucky not to win, if we're honest, came from such a long way back. Salam was given a more prominent ride, but still showed really good attitude to overcome some really pretty useful rivals there, including the Lion in Winter, who you will also know. But this horse, I think for me, the way he's been campaigned, the way he's improved, they weren't happy with him when he was first running as a 3-year-old. He was behind Henry Matisse in the French 2000 Guineas, but he's really got his act together now. We're seeing what he's truly capable of. I think he's got a great post in draw 3. And I think for me, Francis Graffard, straight after the Prix de Moulin, said, we'd like to go to the Breeders' Cup. And for me, that shows that this trainer knows exactly what he wants to do. And he knew that this race would suit him down to the ground. Yeah, I'm really interested in him. He's going to be one that I'm keen to bet on over the weekend.
They're great to hear, of course, especially the way I feel. You mentioned the line one door to the outside. He was a 36-1 outsider in that Prix de Milan and ended up finishing a good third, beating a neck, as Aiden often does. Ran the horse again in the QE2 on British Champions Day a couple of weeks ago. So he's a horse coming back in 14 days. Obviously not the most ideal scenario. Also one that hasn't won since August of 2024. It's not really possible these horses are the same price, I wouldn't think, at the end of the day. And if so, clearly we're both favoring Salon.
Yeah, I'm favouring Salon. But the Lion in Winter's a fascinating horse because at the start of the year he was dubbed as the Coolmore 3-year-old that was going to win all the classics, was going to win the Guineas, the Derby, was going to win everything. Now, you don't have to be a genius to realise that hasn't quite worked out. But that said, he's really got his act together on his last couple of starts, and he seems to like France as well. He was third in the 7 furlong Prix Jean Prat, and that was only beaten a quarter of a length, was a really close finish. Absolutely nowhere in the Jacques Lamar one. We thought, what on earth is going on there? Obviously, Notable Speech was unlucky not to win that, just ahead behind the winner, Diego Velasquez. But then, again, he put in another really admirable run, closing late. Rosalian was closing late. He dropped just a third close home behind Salan in the Moulin. And then another great run in the QE2 behind Cicero's Gift. Maybe he was favoured by the inside draw then, but he's certainly stringing together a good group of performances. And the fact that Aidan O'Brien's thought, we'll stick him on the lorry. He's thriving on his racing at the moment, so you'd be foolish to underestimate him. But I like the profile of Salan. I like how he's been brought on. But they're both going to have a pretty big horse to beat in Notable Speech, of course.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about Notable Speech, who won the Woodbine Mile last out, a race run around 2 turns this year at almost the exact same configuration as what they will go around at Del Mar. Notable Speech was beaten less than a length in last year's Breeders' Cup Mile. This field has significantly more depth from top to bottom than last year's did, in my opinion. But obviously, Notable Speech a deserving favorite in this group.
He is. It's frustrating that he couldn't win last year because I think that was certainly a weaker edition than this. He's been a frustrating horse since he won the 2000 Guineas last year and the Sussex Stakes. You know, shown his star quality there, but in a way, I think he's very well suited to the stateside way of racing because he's very quick and his connections cottoned on to that when they sent him for the July Cup over the 6 furlongs, supplementing him for that in July. Didn't quite pay off there, was only 5th, but has looked very good since in that Jacques Lamar behind Diego Velasquez. He didn't get a clear run, got blocked at a key stage, just beaten by a head. He was the moral winner, really. And then, as you say, at Woodbine last time in the Woodbine Mile, I mean, he had the ability to beat those horses very easily, but he still did, despite things not going perfectly to plan for him. He overcame a lot. These are the sort of conditions he wants. These are his optimum ideal conditions. And he's very, very quick, but he's proven before that he can find himself in bits of trouble. So I guess that's your concern with him. And I think the two post probably makes you more concerned that he's going to get stuck on the inside again.
Yeah, it does. This is also not the most pace laden Breeders' Cup Mile field that we've seen. I
Mm.
think they'll go quickly enough, but I do wonder just how quickly they'll go. And it was obvious that I think William Buick, having failed on a couple of horses earlier on the program on Woodbine Mile Day, he deliberately tried to get him more forward in that race, and it obviously paid off because he had less work to do in the final stages of it. But yeah, our domestic horses in here are not that quick. So how fast the pace gets, that will be the question. Any other international entrants in here that you wanted to touch on? We'll have a long shot in Kirat on the outside at 20 to 1 for Ray Beckett. And we also have John Keel for Andrew Balding, who ran in the Coolmore Turf Mile last out at Keeneland. Really didn't make much of an impression, was on the move late to round out the Superfecta, and now will bid for a big win here.
Yeah, let's talk about Kirat first off because he produced one of the most crazy performances I've ever seen when winning that Sussex Stakes this summer. He rewrote history in the process. It's been written again since with a big price Group 1 winner on Champions Day. But yeah, he's going to absolutely love this. They've mentioned this race for him for a long time. The quick ground and the sort of the turns, he's going to be absolutely on it. Of course, he wasn't as good since because you were never going to emulate a race like the Sussex Stakes every time. He was forgotten as a pacemaker more or less, and he was allowed to get away with it. Just wanted to mention, you were talking about the pace and how it might not be that strong. The Lion in Winter, I think, is likely to go further forward than back. Maybe Christophe Soumillon will take a different approach, but I think he could be one of those pace angles. As for John Courier, he's an admirable enough performer, but he just needs to step up in terms of class for this.
We also saw, admittedly, the Japanese runners, who we've not talked about. They showed a lot more speed last year in these races than I anticipated, and so we'll see maybe if we get a little bit of pace in this particular affair out of a horse like Argine, who has not really been all that forward on a number of occasions, but is a horse with some pretty good class angles. Did you have any thought on Argine?
I haven't looked at her in any great depth, but she is by a very, very quick sire in Lord Canelo, although he does get horses who, of course, stay further. You can't underestimate a Japanese horse, and you can't underestimate Frankie Dettori, so could be a key player when it comes to how the race is going to set up.
Yes, and Frankie has definitely made a home here, riding aggressively and showing that ability to finish that you guys were treated to for a long, long time over there. We're getting our
Yeah.
taste of it in the twilight of his career. Let's talk about the final Breeders' Cup event. It's the Filly and Mare Turf at 1.375 miles on the turf. It will be the nightcap on Saturday. And another situation where a prominent European-based runner has drawn the far outside. That is the 14, See the Fire, who comes in off a narrow miss in the Prix de l'Opera. I have to say, Maddie, going through some of her replays and some of these running lines, she has taken on some very good horses, and any of her blemishes, they seem to be easily excused.
Yeah, she's a hugely admirable filly. She's been highly tried, like you say, against the Colts, and been unlucky on a couple of occasions as well. I know that Oisin Murphy in particular was agonising when he got beaten in the Nassau Stakes last season behind Opera Singer. See the Fire put in one of her best performance by a long, long way earlier this season in the Middleton Stakes at York. She was absolutely exceptional that day, and I think you've touched on it there. She's not won since, but that's purely because the quality of opposition she's been facing has been really, really strong. Third in the Prince of Wales' Stakes behind Ombudsman and Anma. Ombudsman, we know he's a horse of the year caliber over here. Anma won the Champion Stakes last year. Then went to Goodwood. Those conditions probably didn't suit her. Finished behind Whirl. Again had Ombudsman Delacroix in front of her at York in a very funny race. Beat Darius, who went on to win the Arc there. And as you say, was only just second to Barnavara in the Prix de l'Opera last time. She she's very admirable, and I'm really interested to see how she handles Del Mar and handles this trip. She has the standout form for sure, but there's some really interesting fillies entered in there behind her. I don't think, apart from her, there's much between them. So it's going to be very interesting to see.
What about Cinderella's Dream, who we saw nearly win this race last year at 5-2? Had a, I guess, what you could consider to be a little bit of trouble, a little traffic trouble, but now comes back into this race. The thing that surprised me about Cinderella's Dream, having seen her over here a couple of times, is that it really felt like Charlie Appleby deliberately tried to keep her short this year. And I didn't really see her as much of a miler. What do you think of him doing that and her chances here, now stretching it back out to the mile and 3/8?
Yeah, it's an interesting move. Obviously, she's had a lot of her success stateside, so we know she handles these sorts of tracks more than the more typical European tracks. Maybe that was a deliberate ploy, as you say. Naturally, some of those races, I guess, they would have been looking at anyway. Cinderella's Dream, she looked exceptional when she won the Falmouth Stakes back in July, and before that, put in a decent run when she was second in the Duke of Cambridge Stakes as well. But I was expecting her to win that day, and she couldn't get the better of Crimson Advocate. And then she was no match really for Quisisana in the Prix Jean Romanet. And beaten again last time behind Fallen Angel. That was an excellent performance by the Grey filly. I think she set a record on Newmarket's track with one of her closing sectionals. But I was hoping for more from her then. It was certainly a long way off her Falmouth win earlier on in the season. I don't think she's one to rely on Cinderella's Dream, but she's got a lot of quality, as we're familiar with, having seen her go close in this contest before.
Another Group 1 winner in here, number 5, Gazora, for Peter Brandt and Francois-Henri Graffard, who we talked a little bit about with Salon. This is a horse that, again, is a Group 1 winner in 2025. Comes in off a poor performance, but it was in the Arc, right? So I think you can excuse that quite a bit. She rates a big chance in here, I would think.
Yeah, I would prefer her to Cinderella's Dream just because of her profile. And we mentioned that man again, Francis Graffard. I think he's going to come close to world domination in the next couple of years. He's just got such strength and depth in his string, and I really like how he manages and prepares his horses. You say that Gazora was a Group 1 winner this year. That was in the Prix de Diane Longines, beating Bedtime Story, who's also in this race. Showed a really good turn of foot there. Matched that when she was second in the Prix Vermeil behind Aventure. Certainly lost little in defeat. Again, Bedtime Story was behind her there. And like you say, a lot of people were expecting more from her in the Arc last time. She was held up. She could just never really get involved. Maybe it was the soft ground that she wasn't absolutely in love with, but she'd certainly put in some good performances on it as a juvenile. I think these conditions are going to see her to better effect. I think her turn of foot makes her a player on this sort of ground and around this track. And I just think she's got more to offer. She's more unexposed compared to the likes of Cinderella's Dream and even See the Fire, who, okay, is operating at a much higher level.
Right, exactly. So for American racing fans, we see a horse like She Feels Pretty, who we're very familiar with, who was taken really right to the wire by Diamond Rain last time out. Diamond Rain looks to me like a bit of an outsider in here. And can you compare a little bit about what Diamond Rain, who Diamond Rain is coming into this race versus horses like Gazora and See the Fire?
Yeah, Diamond Rain's a really interesting filly because she was rated so highly as a 3-year-old. She was thought of as an Oaks contender. Didn't run in the Oaks in the end, ran in an Oaks trial and won it impressively at Newbury, but went to Ascot for what we call the Ascot Oaks, I guess, which is the Ribblesdale Stakes. And she was just so disappointing there. Had a break, came out of Doncaster, was okay there to finish fourth. Anyway, come back this season. It was key that they kept her in training, really, I guess. Won a listed race at Haydock. That's not, nowhere near Group 1 standard. Then went to Newcastle to win a Group 3. They were clearly getting her back to form, and they thought that the style of racing in Woodbine would suit her. She went very close. I was disappointed that she couldn't actually beat She Feels Pretty. I think that was probably about her level. It was a much improved performance on anything she'd done in this country. But I think the quality of opposition here, when you talk about See the Fire finishing behind horses like Ombudsman and Anmat and Whirl, very different to those fillies that Diamond Rain was beating at Newcastle and Haydock anyway.
No, that's kind of what I was thinking. So that's well said. Anybody else from this filly and mare turf you wanted to take a look at?
Well, I mentioned Bedtime Story. She's been sort of a bit disappointing since she won the Chesham Stakes so impressively at Royal Ascot last year. But there's the suspicion that when things drop perfectly right for her, she will have a big day. And I do think she'll run a big race in this race because I think she wants a decent pace and she likes the quick conditions. I could see her running well, but she's just not going to have the quality to match those towards the top of the market.
So many times horses like this over here, we became jaded against them because they looked like plain fillers for Aiden that he was sending over just because there was another slot. But I will say that horses like this with back form that he seems to be sending here, you almost wonder if it's a ground thing or if for some reason he thinks they might benefit from a little bit more of an American style race. So yeah,
I
she's
think
one that, because if you look through her running lines, as you know, she's got races that are very competitive to both Gazora and See the Fire, who are the two horses to beat in here. And so, when she runs second at 15 or 20 to 1, you go back and look and you say, well, she really wasn't that far off these horses not that long ago. There's at least a case to be made.
Exactly. I think we're in danger with doing that with these results. They don't always make perfect sense at the Breeders' Cup. You can't transfer our form to the American tracks and the Breeders' Cup and it would translate perfectly. Some of the form will be reversed. There will be some surprises. You mentioned Starlust earlier on. He wouldn't have been among the strongest sprinters over here. It may not make sense on paper, but you have to at least give them credit.
Exactly right. Yeah, no question about it. And that is what makes this weekend of racing so much fun. Well, Maddy, this has been so much fun. We really appreciate you joining us to get a look at these horses. And I'm hopeful that you do a good enough job, that we've done a good enough job, that we enlist your services in the future for the Breeders' Cup and anytime we have some international participation. So a big thank you.
Oh no, I'd absolutely love it. Hugely passionate about the international racing. It helps, like I say, that we've got a team of really, really strong horses that I can hopefully talk about and give some insight on, and some of them which we've not even had time to mention. But yeah, I can't wait to see Mini Hawk v Rebels Romance. That's going to be amazing.
A big thank you to Maddy Playle and to all of you. Make sure you are all over the TwinSpires app and twinspires.com. Promos galore. Tomorrow night, a deep dive into handicapping the Breeders' Cup with myself, Eddie Olczyk, Dr. Marshall Graham, and Travis Stone, the voice of the Kentucky Derby, as we take a look at the Turf Mile and Classic, in addition to some other spots. Well, a big thank you once again. Until next time.